All right, let's get started here. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to join us this morning. All right, we've put together a very straightforward webinar. It's going to candidly discuss the differences between the public cloud and the private cloud. I've got Jamal and Steven here with me. They're going to explain the advantages and the disadvantages as we're getting ready to start here. This presentation will be recorded and it will be available to all the attendees and will be on our website, so you can look for that soon. This is the very first of Fpweb.net's new webinar series discussing the cloud. So thanks again for spending the 20 minutes of your morning with us. We hope that you're able to take away a clear understanding of the different types of clouds and what will work best for your business. So a couple quick reminders for those of us who just joined. Questions and comments can be asked through the chat feature on the webinar. That's going to be to the right of your screen. You can also tweet us at #Fpwebinar. This webinar is being recorded. Once again, we will get it available to you. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters, Mr. Jamal Pryor and Steven Rupp. Take it away, boys.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamal Pryor. I'm one of the SharePoint architects here at Fpweb.net. I actually started off as a support engineer helping out with our existing client base in regards to network connectivity issues and also SharePoint-related issues. I later transitioned on to the SharePoint architect role where I help acquire new business and also architect solutions to meet clients' business needs.
Yep, and hi everybody, I'm Steven Rupp. I'm one of the SharePoint architects here at Fpweb.net as well. I've had the privilege of working with our prospects and clients over the past 10 months to analyze their business needs, figure out what kind of cloud model that they fit in from a SharePoint perspective, and had experience learning about the private and public as well.
Awesome. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to the Fpweb.net's new webinar series.
I think we should call it Fpwebinar.
Good call, Steve.
Got a ring.
Hey, and just so you guys know, Steve is the more creative one. I'm just a realist.
And guys, what we're going to go ahead and do at the end of the webinar, as Peter mentioned, you can tweet us via #Fpwebinar for any questions, and there will also be a chat window up in the top right-hand corner of the WebEx to send them that way as well.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. What is the public cloud? It's a multi-tenant environment that different organizations and our individuals use to utilize shared resources, such as data storage, processor speed, memory utilization. And just to put that more in perspective, I'm going to use an apartment analogy. So let's say, for instance, you have multiple tenants that utilize different units within a building structure. They all share common resources such as water supply, the power, the gas sources. So all that is spliced within the different units, which is essentially like the multi-tenant environment. All those resources are shared on the server amongst the different tenants.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the private cloud? The private cloud is a 100% dedicated virtual machine, or in some instances, a host. I like the same analogy that Jamal used. I like to think of this whenever I'm talking to prospects. It's your house. So if we want to change the siding on the outside, if we want to paint the walls on the inside, you have that level of control. In addition, if we want to add a second story, we're not in that kind of apartment scenario per se like the public cloud, to where we don't have to worry about the guy above us either, because this is all ours. We're not affected, so there's an enhanced security around it, and that's primarily the private cloud.
Exactly. You got full customization capabilities, so you don't have to worry about any other individuals affecting your environment.
Yep.
So with that said, we're going to jump into the advantages and disadvantages of the public and private cloud. So with the public cloud, let's say, for instance, you're a small startup or a small business and you don't have that large capital to deploy an enterprise solution. The good thing about the public cloud, it's a very low-cost solution, and it's easy to set up. Something you can do yourself, a few clicks of the mouse, and your site's provisioned, and you can start taking advantage of the public cloud. So there's no deployment experts that's needed within the public cloud environments. So no consultants. All you basically do is get the site provisioned, it's up and running, and you can even add small custom web parts and things like that within that environment.
Yeah, but the biggest thing, guys, with as Jamal mentioned, it's the upfront capital. It's not as much as going to the private cloud route. So jumping into the private cloud, what does that translate to? That analogy that we spoke about. What that kind of is we can easily add resources on the fly. If we need to do storage, VPUs, RAM, anything like that, it's way more easier to do that. In addition, since this is fully dedicated to you, there's an enhanced security around having your dedicated virtual machine or host. You get to control your security just like you would be able in your own household. In addition, we don't have to worry about the performance factor. We're not impacted by others that are around us. And one of the things I really like too is you can apply third-party applications typically in a private cloud environment, and you can get a higher level of access, whether that's RDPing in, which is remote desktop server, or if you want to get into SQL or the main control consoles, you typically have that ability with the private cloud.
Exactly. So we just spoke about the advantages, but as to every advantage, there's equal and opposite disadvantage. So with the public cloud, some of the disadvantages is from a security aspect. So you're in a shared environment that multiple tenants utilize, so there is the security factor in place. So if you're like a hospital or the medical industry, banking industries, and things like that, where you need to meet compliances, the public cloud is probably not the right environment. Along with that, the possibility of performance issues as well. Let's use the analogy of the apartment again. So let's say, for instance, a neighbor was to be making a hot dog, per se, and he falls asleep and the apartment ends up getting on fire. You would be affected by that, which is the same scenario as a public cloud environment. If somebody was to deploy some custom code or run some strenuous processes, that will cause your environment possibly to go down or experience high latency. Another disadvantage of the public cloud is the restriction to customizations and scalability. So with that being said, you can't really custom brand the environment, or you can't knock down a wall of an apartment.
I don't think the landlord would like that either.
Yeah, exactly. So there are many restrictions within the public cloud, so that's something you definitely want to take in consideration.
Yeah. And, moving forward to the disadvantages of the private cloud, it comes down to the biggest factor out there. You're getting that higher level of customization, accessibility, enhanced security, but that comes with a premium. So, there's not a whole bunch of disadvantages to it, but at the same time, to get everything, there's typically a higher cost associated.
Exactly, and to go ahead and recap what we just went over, we talked about the advantages and the disadvantages of the public and the private cloud. So with the public cloud, it's a very low-cost solution for startups, small businesses, and it's very easy to set up, something that you can do yourself and doesn't require experts and consultants in order to get the solution up and rolling. But along with those advantages, the disadvantages is the security, the performance issues, possibly due to other tenants within that environment, and the restrictions on customizations.
Yeah, and to recap the private cloud, this is that instance of you have a 100% dedicated virtual machine or host. This is the house approach to it, to where we can add resources on the fly, storage, VPUs, RAM. There's an enhanced level of security because we have a lot more control around this. In addition, performance is not impacted. If we want to apply third-party applications, we get a higher level of accessibility with being able to remote desktop and get into the main control consoles that we like. So there's a lot of great benefits to the private and the public cloud. And one of the things, too, that we'll actually talk about in a later webinar is the hybrid clouds, which is another good scenario. But one of the things is you're probably wondering what kind of solution providers out there offer these services. From a private cloud perspective, Azure is one of the big ones. AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. And from a SharePoint perspective, Fpweb.net.
Exactly. And then from a public cloud perspective, a few of the providers out there will be like Office web apps, a Gmail, which everybody uses on a daily basis, and also Dropbox.
Mm-hmm. So in conclusion, you're probably wondering, what steps do we need to take to figure out what kind of cloud environment we should start with? There's a couple key questions that I typically like to let people know to ask the hosting provider, and then also to ask internally to, do your own internal investigations. Those questions typically are, what do we need control of? What is our budget? What applications are we putting into the cloud? And in addition, one of the things a lot of people should ask in regards to whenever you're talking to the hosting provider is, what kind of certifications do they have around their data center? That could bring out a lot more questions too, because what if you're in the healthcare industry? One of the big things that affects them a lot is HIPAA compliance, to where typically whenever you're dealing with customer-sensitive data, you have to have data encryption software on top of it. Maybe you're in retail and you are affected by PCI compliance. That would be another instance where you most likely need data encryption, and therefore that could put you right into a private cloud because you need that level of customization. There's a lot of different scenarios, and one of the other big things that Jamal talked about is what's our growth look like too?
Yeah, exactly. From a public cloud perspective, one thing you definitely have to ask yourself is what do we intend our growth on being within the next 1 to 2 years? So you may start out with 100 employees, and over the next 2 years you may grow to 300 employees. From a public cloud perspective, there's restrictions on the amount of users you have, the amount of storage and other resources within the server environments in the public cloud. So those are things to take into consideration when deciding between public and private cloud.
Yeah. And one of the other good questions too, when you're talking to the hosting provider, figure out where their data center is. You want to make sure that this is not running in somebody's basement per se. You want to make sure it's an enterprise data center that has redundant generators, IPSs, which are intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, and a lot more. And a good key time to take advantage of that is a lot of the hosting providers out there, they'll offer free consultations. Make sure you come prepared with a list of questions. Be ready to hammer away, and get all the information that you can. And one of the things too that we'll do at the end, we have a free white paper that we'll be sending out that includes the top 10 questions every customer should be asking a hosting provider. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into our FAQ, and feel free to reach out to us via #Fpwebinar or the chat window on the WebEx in the top right-hand corner. Thank you guys, we appreciate it, and here's Peter.
Okay, like you said, be sure to send any questions in at this point. We have a few questions here already. First one is, can people hack into the cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question. And typically, you can, that's possible even on an on-premise solution, or whether you're looking at a private or a public cloud. I will say with the private cloud, there is an enhanced security around it, because in the public mode, you're sharing resources with everybody. In regards to the private, you can have that level of security to take preventative measures. But it all depends on the scenario. Each and every one definitely has its vulnerability.
Exactly. And from a public cloud perspective, you have to look at the fact that there's maybe 100, maybe 1,000 individuals that's sharing within that same environment, and there's a possibility one of those individuals could be malicious, trying to deploy code in those environments and to capture either data or bring down that environment. So in shared environments, there is a stronger vulnerability of being hacked.
Okay, thanks, guys. Another question for you. Are there industries in particular that fit better in the private cloud?
Yes. As we discussed, HIPAA is a big certification out there that generally push you right to the private cloud. Banking and retail. And the reason why you're getting pushed to the private cloud is that level of accessibility and customization that you have to do to the cloud. You run into those restrictions whenever you're looking at the public cloud. So great question, and you definitely can get pushed either way depending on your industry.
Okay. Third question, so are there any security risks in the private cloud?
There's definitely security risks in the private cloud, but it's the same with, if you're looking at the public or you're doing an on-premise solution. You just have to make sure that you take the preventative measures to take full advantage of the level of accessibility and customization to prevent that.
Yeah, and also from the private cloud perspective as well, you just want to make sure that you're asking those questions to the hosting provider, making sure that they have the hardware in place to prevent those attacks and vulnerabilities and things like that.
Yep.
Right, and I'll step in just to add that, as Steven had mentioned, a lot of hosting providers do offer those free consultations, so you want to make sure to take advantage of that. You need to figure out what your environment needs, and when you're reaching out to them, know which questions to ask, and that's why we're going to be sending out a white paper with the top 10 questions to ask every hosting provider at the conclusion of this webinar, so be sure to look out for that. Moving on to another question. Is there a way I can just try the cloud out but not put all of my data at risk?
Yes, definitely. So let's say, for instance, you had all your internal data on your network, and you somehow wanted your client base to be able to see data, but not everything, or your partners to see specific data. You can actually deploy public-facing sites within the cloud or extranet environments within the cloud, and leave all your intranet-based material on your network. So that is definitely a strong possibility. And as time goes on and you get more comfortable with the cloud, you can definitely start the transition and migration over to a full cloud solution. But, in the meantime, the hybrid cloud solution is definitely a possibility.
Yep, and that's a topic that will come up in our next webinar, and it's been getting a lot of traction, is these hybrid deployments. Well, great question.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one more question. What happens if there is an outage in the cloud? Can you lose everything?
So there's a lot of preventative measures, and that comes down to whenever you're talking with your hosting provider, is looking at the disaster recovery scenarios, because there could always potentially be an outage. You got to make sure, how is your data being backed up? Are they doing local backups? Do they have some kind of geographic backup to where they're pushing it off to another data center? And then DR, which is also disaster recovery, there's a whole big push behind that too. You can do what they call cold DR, to where it is just we're pushing data over. Or if you're looking for a full-blown hot DR plan, they call it, is to where you could literally be up and running after the first site fails within 15 to 20 minutes per se. So it is possible to have outages, but that's where we got to take the proper precautions to make sure our data is being backed up and we can be up and running from another data center. Good question.
Okay, folks, it is a short webinar series. That's why we are going to wrap up now. But make sure, if you have any questions that come to you after we conclude this, be sure to reach out to us again. On Twitter, you can hit us at #Fpwebinar, and we're going to get right back to you with some answers for any questions. So use us as a resource as much as you like, please. I'd like to really thank Jamal and Steven for presenting today. Great job, guys. Thanks to all of you for attending. We really appreciate that. It is our first Fpwebinar, so we really want to hear from you. You're going to get a short survey pop up as you exit out of this. We'd love your feedback, guys. We want to hear from you. So we want to hear if this was beneficial for you and for your business, because at Fpweb we may be SharePoint experts, but we do keep our head in the cloud, and we do want to pass along anything that we know to you and to whoever's listening. So thanks again, guys. Have a great day. Thanks, Jamal and Steven.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Have a great morning.